A single office in California decides what 2 billion people see online. A committee in Moscow once set the price of bread for 11 time zones. They both failed for the same simple mechanical reason. Chapter 1: The Promise of the Lever. Let's start with the obvious appeal. Centralized control looks like efficiency. It looks like coordination. If you have one brain, one plan, one set of rules, you should be able to steer the whole ship with purpose. You eliminate wasteful duplication. You align everyone toward a common goal. This is the promise: clarity, consistency, and the power of the lever. Pull here, and the whole machine moves. For a CEO, a government minister, or a platform executive, this is deeply seductive. You get a clean organizational chart. You have clear lines of authority. You can issue a directive on Monday, and in theory, see it implemented globally by Friday. The incentive for the person at the top is total alignment. Their vision becomes the system's output. The stated goal is always coherence and strategic direction. But this is only the theory. The practice is where the machine grinds to a halt, and the first point of failure isn't malice or stupidity. It's something far more mundane: an information bottleneck. To understand why that bottleneck is fatal, you need to see what happens to information on its long journey from the ground to the top. Chapter 2: The Information Starvation Diet. Here's the mechanism any centralized system operates on: reports. The people on the ground, the factory manager, the content moderator in a distant country. The regional sales head, they see reality. Their reality is messy, local, and filled with a million tiny details, but they can't send a million details up the chain, so they condense. They summarize. They translate complex situations into a handful of metrics that fit on a dashboard: units produced, flagged posts removed, quarterly revenue. In this process, most of the information is lost. The nuance, the context, the local exception, the emerging pattern that doesn't fit the existing categories, it gets filtered out. What arrives at the central decision-making office is a highly processed, abstracted version of reality. It's like trying to diagnose a patient's health by only looking at their height and weight. Now apply the constraint check. The central office has to make decisions for thousands of unique local contexts using this starved dataset. The math doesn't work. You cannot have perfect information about a complex adaptive system flowing to a single point in real time. The bandwidth isn't there. The system is trying to do something logically impossible. So, decisions are made based on this abstract picture. A policy is crafted for the average case, and then it's sent back down. This is where the second systemic flaw kicks in: decision latency. But a slow, slightly wrong decision is one thing. The real breakdown happens when the system tries to fix its own mistakes. Chapter 3: Incentive Distortion. When a central directive born from abstract data lands in a local context where it doesn't fit, people don't just shut down. They adapt. But their adaptation isn't to achieve the original goal. It's to satisfy the metric they are being measured on. This is incentive distortion at scale. Let's make it concrete. Say a social media company's HQ, responding to public pressure, mandates a crackdown on hate speech. They issue a new policy and track it with one key metric: percentage of flagged content removed. The incentive for the local moderator is now crystal clear. Hit the removal target, not understand context, not foster healthy discourse. Remove content, the outcome. Moderators start removing borderline cases to be safe. They might even over-remove to pad their numbers, creating a buffer. Users learn to game the system by mass reporting opponents. The platform becomes less functional, even as the central dashboard shows a soaring policy compliance rate. The goal of a healthier platform and the incentive of hitting a removal target have diverged completely. Historically, we saw this in Soviet central planning. Factories were judged on tonnage of output. The result: factories produced comically heavy, low-quality machines to hit their weight quotas, while consumers lacked basic, well-made goods. The local incentive, meet the tonnage metric, destroyed the system-level goal of efficient production of useful goods. The system isn't being run by idiots. It's being run by rational actors responding perfectly to the incentives the centralized structure creates. They are putting on a theater of compliance for the only audience that matters: the central office checking the dashboard. So if centralization reliably creates these failures, why does it remain the default model for so long? The answer lies in a powerful final illusion. Chapter 4: The Illusion of the Fix. The most predictable phase is the crisis response. When the centralized system produces bad outcomes, a failed product launch, a regional rebellion, a public relations disaster, the diagnosis from the center is almost always the same: a lack of control. The solution: more control. Tighter rules, more detailed reporting, stricter oversight. This is the fatal loop. The system is choking on poor information, so it demands more information, creating more bureaucracy and more lag. It is suffering from distorted incentives, so it creates more complex metrics, which spawn even more ingenious forms of gaming. Each fix adds another layer, another process, another bottleneck. The system becomes slower, more expensive, and more brittle. It tries to solve a complexity problem with a complication solution. A decentralized, adaptive system, like a market, a robust ecosystem, or a network of independent teams, solves problems locally. Information and decision-making are distributed. A startup can pivot in a week because the people seeing the problem are empowered to fix it. In a centralized corporation, that same pivot requires a year of meetings, presentations, and approvals, by which time the opportunity is gone. The central planner, whether in a Politburo or a C-suite, is always fighting the last war. They are designing rules for the world as it was reported to them, not as it is. Chapter 5: The Mechanical Fragility. You don't have to run a country or a tech giant to see this principle in action. Look at any large, rigid institution in your life: a university administration, a government agency, a sprawling corporate division. The telltale signs are there: processes that exist to serve other processes, frontline employees who know exactly which rules to bypass to get real work done, and leaders who are perpetually surprised by problems everyone else saw coming. The takeaway isn't that centralization is evil, it's that it is mechanically fragile. It has a very limited capacity for handling complexity and change. Your heuristic should be this: when you see a system failing in confusing ways, look not for villains, but for bottlenecks. Look for where local information is being summarized away and where local incentives have been twisted to serve a distant dashboard. The unresolved exposure is always the same. The world keeps getting more complex, interconnected, and faster. Centralized systems, by their architecture, get slower and more simplistic in their understanding. That gap is where failure lives. The question is never if the gap will cause a breakdown, but when, and what the theater of compliance will look like when it does. What large system in your world is currently running on an information starvation diet? If you found this breakdown useful, please follow and subscribe for more.